I'd like to welcome special guest, writer, actor, producer, Lisha Brooks. Lisha also runs the Michael Brooks Legacy Project, which is extremely important. Um, Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you worked in the film industry. Now, in many ways, over the past 4 or 5 years, the film industry has kind of gotten a bad rap in many ways. What's your experience been like? Has it been good overall? Has it been bad?
I moved to Los Angeles and finished up my undergrad out here. And from a really young age, um, it sounds like, it sounds similar to saying, like, I want to be a Marvel hero. I want to be an actress since I was like 3. Um, and so at a certain point, the idea of being kind of hustling and trying to make it in entertainment in New York versus LA. It was a lot more appealing to be, broke and trying to make it happen where it was sunny and, you wouldn't be like trudging through snow and cold. Yeah, so I basically spent the majority of the time I lived in Los Angeles. I worked as a nanny and had various other gigs, and I wasn't really working in the industry. I interned for the Conan show. That was kind of like a couple of months. Was there
How was
something you wanted
that?
to ask about that? Oh, um, it was good. It was pretty brief. I think it was like a semester program, but it was only a couple of months. I learned a lot. My class consciousness was not as I don't know, astute then. I don't think, I
Yeah.
think there had just been a scandal around how the PAs have been treated on
Mm.
Black Swan.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that? And I think there were starting to kind of be like murmurs around ending unpaid internships. And
Mm.
I had definitely had moments of feeling really angry and frustrated as, working in retail or restaurants or whatever. But when I was an unpaid intern on the Conan show, I was really excited kind of to just be working on a lot. And I had saved up money from my other job, so I wasn't so critical about
Right.
how the idea of like how classist and exclusive. I think I like thought it was messed up that most people didn't get to do it. I felt like
Hmm.
through a crazy circumstance, I had been a live-in nanny and saved up to get to do an unpaid internship, which
Yeah.
obviously is an insane way to build a career
Yeah.
structure.
No, that's really interesting how, you attach that to your, class consciousness. I definitely I've had to evolve my class consciousness quite a bit. Like it's definitely not something that you're like born with, and that's something we'll talk about your brother here in a little bit. That's something that he really developed a lot and explored that idea of just like being aware of class and applying it to looking. It's almost classes in some ways even like a lens to look through the world at in some ways, like with your example of being able to do that unpaid internship. So yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned that. So I was listening a couple months ago. um let's see, it was like a couple of years ago. Michael did a David Feldman show
Mhm.
interview, and he mentioned that you guys were homeschooled. At least, were you homeschooled as well, or was just Michael?
So Michael was far more homeschooled than I was.
Okay.
Um, I was homeschooled a tiny bit, maybe for like a year and a half, but I did ultimately go to school, and Michael pretty much was homeschooled until high school, and then the high school he went to was the high school I went to, which was a charter school that was, legitimately wanted to do something pertaining to, the arts and kids kind
Mhm.
of getting to focus on that. It wasn't like a shell for like a DeVos type religious agenda. I
Yeah,
know charter schools now, there's a lot more
they have a bad rep. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I
but
don't really have the strongest opinion on. I obviously don't want public school districts to be losing funding to go to extreme religious, education, but
right.
I don't have the biggest lens on exactly what goes down with the charter school uh,
Hmm.
debacle.
So then you and Michael both went to
Yeah,
that
we both went
performing
to a
arts
performing
school.
arts high school, but Michael's 7 years older than me, so he was there, pretty much a long time before me. But then when I came, he definitely had left his mark, and a lot of teachers were like, "Oh, like
Yeah.
your little sister."
Do you
Um,
think either homeschooling or the performative arts high school, because they're both in a sense like non-traditional schools. I mean, homeschooling is non-traditional from public school, and in many ways a performing arts, charter is much different than a public high school. Do you think that had an impact on both of you or either of you in the way like you pursued acting, Michael pursued commentating and internet shows? Do you think that had something to do with it?
yeah, um, this kind of it's so strange, like one's upbringing and what happens in your in your home, or where you're raised versus your education. It's almost like a bit of a nature versus nurture. I can't speak for Michael, obviously, but I do think we both were kind of raised with this. I sort of thought the only way I could like make it out of, kind of a pretty, just work all day, and, like an hourly
Nine to five.
wait. Yeah, or not even 9 to 5 per se. I really didn't think I had the skill set to even hack it in corporate America. And I think Michael and I, like, Michael didn't read until he was 10. I definitely have some kind
Really?
of, yeah.
Wow. Because I just imagined he just read all the time.
Yes, when he started reading, he read all the time, and the family lore goes that his first book he read was Malcolm X's autobiography. But we
That's
both, yeah, I
that's
know it's,
insane.
yeah, I mean, it's if you're not in school, like, really being taught to read, and like I think Michael spent a lot of time just kind of running around and playing outside and not necessarily like doing lessons. Um, yeah, I read really late as well. But I think we both had a bit of an insecurity about like, I think part of the reason we both pursued entertainment, and, for Michael, it was like, I mean, Michael wanted to be president. Michael had such ambition,
Yeah.
and I think it was evolving and kind of grounding and changing as he got older. But
Hmm.
I think we kind of didn't think we could hack it doing anything else. I know it sounds really crazy. It sounds like saying, "Oh, the only way we thought we could make money was winning the lottery," essentially.
Yeah. No, yeah, I sometimes feel like that, like I couldn't do a traditional job for very long. And that is sort of true. Like I'm a PCA, I get to pick my hours, and most of my hours are like bunched up into like one weekend where I'll get like 40 or 50 hours, and then I
What's
won't.
PTA?
It's a public care assistant, so like I take care of um special needs. I just take care of one person actually. So,
Oh wow, that's
but
awesome.
yeah, I just know his adoptive mom pretty well.
Okay,
She did my daycare, and so now I get a pretty good. It's a union job. It
that's
pays
great.
pretty well,
That's
and
great.
it's not too hard either. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Um.
And are you in
So
school?
yep, I do school. Yeah, I it's my first year in college. So
Oh wow, and look at you. You're podcasting and
yeah, do a
studying.
lot of stuff.
Oh,
I'm writing for Black Star News, which everybody should check
oh
out as
wow.
well. Yeah, I just do like try to do like once a month articles and stuff on there too. So
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Excited to
So
see everything you do.
yeah, definitely. Well, we've gotten to connect over social media a little bit, which is nice. You and Michael have both been just super like you guys have were always just super open about like communications and talking to people, and that's always been nice. But uh so in Hollywood, there's been like a sort of renaissance of like class-based films over the
Mhm.
past couple of years. For Parasite is probably the most prominent example. I'm sure you've seen that. Knives Out, Ready or Not, The Platform, which is a new one on Netflix. Do you think this is just a reflection of politics and like class consciousness coming to Hollywood or political awareness, or is what do you think about that? Where do you think that comes from?
You know, it's interesting. I think about this a lot, and you know, like you'll sometimes see someone post how much they love Parasite. Didn't Elon
Yep.
Musk say it was his favorite film of the year or something?
Yeah,
Um,
and it's very ironically, and they're not aware of how ironic it is that they're the
sure,
person.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a quote in the movie. I think it says it's you know it's very easy to be nice when you're rich. It's kind of like oh, it's very easy to enjoy Parasite when you're rich.
Yeah, and that's true. Like it when you have all your needs met, it's very hard. It's very easy to be nice to somebody.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, I I think that Hollywood has always uh, taken really good novels and short stories and different original works. And I'm not saying that all of the movies you just mentioned had that kind of IP, but I think there's always been like a long history of kind of like what has kind of engaged people. It gets turned into a film. So even if the people making the film, and again, I'm not speaking for all those films or those filmmakers, I really don't know much about it, but I think sometimes, you know, it's like an edgy in thing. It's kind of like maybe the way sometimes now people can kind of be criticized for being like diehard for Bernie, but having really no political analysis or understand. You know, you know,
Right.
you see people kind of attacking each other online, like oh, they're just they want to be cool, or you know, which is
Hmm.
funny to me because in the circles I've been in, it's either people are really into Bernie because they need health care, or they are
Yep.
really aggressive because they have a very skewed sense of feminism that's not at all, you know,
Yeah.
integrate into a broader consciousness of what actually being, in my opinion, a feminist in the society, what you need. Um,
Right.
I don't think I really have a clear answer for your question. It's something I'm kind of thinking about a lot, and the things I keep coming back to when I talk about ideas with my writing partner. You know, I feel like things like, you know, like The Sopranos, I feel like has
Yep.
become like this like socialist
Yeah.
like you know, kind of like, and I feel like Michael loved The Godfather and The Sopranos and these kind of stories of like these people that like, you know, the way our government kind of like, and I'm not saying what Tony Soprano does, like he's not, of course he's, you know, a psychopath, or maybe I'm using the wrong mental a diagnosis, but I'm not saying what he does isn't terrifying, but also like it is interesting how we vilify like, you know, the little guy who's just like making this like microcosm, and then like the
Hmm.
much larger apparatus is so much more sinister. Um, so you don't want to make like the kind of film or television that's really boring and
Right.
dense, you know, and you never quite know, like if you make something that is kind of true to the human experience, that often can be as engaging as something that's like purposefully like engineered to kind of push maybe a class conscious narrative or agenda. So just to finish that thought, one thing I'm always, not always, but recently I've been thinking a lot about, you know, Michael's gone, and he definitely was my just he had such clear analysis. So I've been really trying to like figure out ways to kind of build and hone my own analysis, and just these ideas in society, like what is virtue signaling versus raising awareness, what is telling a story that's like true and needs to have like the light shown on it versus being exploitative about someone's like real pain. What is direct aid that's helping people that really need help, and what's like this kind of ugly charity
Yeah,
philanthropic cycle, so somehow all of those things kind of come back to the filmmaking for me.
that's interesting. Yeah. And look, it's like Hollywood has done class-based films. I mean, obviously, like, and this one is like you said, based off a book. The Grapes of Wrath is probably one of the most prominent class-based films and novels ever. Um, so there's definitely been class-based films, but it just seemed very odd that just all of a sudden everybody needs to make some social in like people like Bong. I hope I'm saying. I know I'm not going to say this right, but Bong Joon Ho, I think.
I think you're
The
close. I'm glad that you didn't ask me to say it first.
yeah. He's like he's made other films, and there's always hints of class in them. So it
Well,
seems
some
like
of your
his.
stories very, very class. I know it's not his book, but I mean,
Mhm. Yeah, and he it seems very like that's something that he's always done, right? But then there's all and now there's like a lot of like different. I know there's a horror movie made in Canada. I think that was Ready or Not. That it's just like it's sort of like applying like every genre to like now class-based films, and I don't. It honestly might go back to like base and superstructure, like with Marxism, like the media influences the culture, which influences the media, maybe.
mhm.
And so yeah, maybe there's some connections to that. But so like what's next for you? Are you just going to keep working on the Michael Brooks legacy, or what are you going to do a podcast? Is there going to be the Lisha Brooks show now, or what's going on?
I feel like it's like that scene in like every like 90s movie where they're like in the studio in the radio station and they're like, so we're kicking
Yeah.
it. Um, So, it's the pandemic, and I always feel like when I come on camera, I feel like I kind of something changes, and I'm like not as like cathartic and just weighed down by like depression and grief. So I always feel like I seem like I'm doing really well. And the camera shuts down, it's like, I feel catatonic again. But um, there are certain things I feel very passionate about when it comes to kind of cementing, and so much media attention happened after Michael's death, and it's really painful because I just wish, I've said this many times, I wish he had been, in a coma or asleep, right, and could wake up and see all the beautiful emails and messages that everyone sends me, and see all, the fact that like Fox News covered his death is like mind blowing, right? It's like crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so, you know, I feel like when people Google Michael, it's a little bit chaotic. It's like this guy is rapping about spirituality, and then he's making fun of Ben Carson, and is he on the
Hmm.
majority report, or is he it's like all this stuff comes up. There's obviously a Wikipedia page, but that's always kind of sparse. So I do feel like I want to there's a couple of projects I have that I want to kind of like create places where people can go and learn about Michael and his work, and hopefully be inspired by what he did, and continue that kind of that impact he was making. So many others I think have kind of picked up that mantle. But anyways, I'm going on. But I'm making a documentary about Michael's life, and I am going to do a podcast, The Brief and Wondrous Life of Michael Brooks, and that's going to be kind of like the first stab at kind of talking about his life, interviewing, collaborators and people who might have been in the TMBS universe, but also like high school friends and people from, kind of, I'm sure there will be political conversations because Michael has always been an inherently political person, but it will also have a biographical bend to it as well. I'm laughing because I recently watched the clip with Michael and Feldman. I think it was in the comedy panel
Yeah,
when he's
that
saying
was
like, "Oh,
good.
I love when you have Dr. Wolf on your show," and you're like, "Hey
Talk about
man,
his
talk about
dad.
your dad." So I guess I'm going to be doing the, I'm going to have Dr. Wolf on to ask him who his guys are.
Yeah, yeah. What's your guys, man? um, you know, I know we're almost out of time, but I did mean to sort of ask you, how has it affected the grieving process with this being so public? Because you were sort of right away kind of forced into not necessarily forced, that's not the right word, but like sort of, maybe like some sort of felt some sort of need to not I, I don't know how to say it, but like you
Yeah.
needed there's people that needed to be addressed sort of like almost right after he died,
Yep.
and he had an audience to speak to. How has that affected like the grieving process for you?
I think I feel like what happened is like right when he died, I went into a state of shock. But in that shock, um, I felt like this intense urgency to go out and speak publicly. And there are a lot of people in Michael's orbit, and his his friends in media and co-hosts who would have done a beautiful job. But it felt like there was a need for someone in our immediate family to go out and just be really clear, like I didn't expect the internet to be as kind as it was. I immediately just had this, like, I don't know why this was a thing, but I was just worried that people would make up lies. um, that they'd say he killed himself or he overdosed, or like when someone dies very young unexpectedly and there's not a cause of death, you always wonder that. That's kind of like
Yeah.
a code in our society. And the truth was, we were just trying to figure out why he had this blood clot and why it was a deadly blood clot. And we didn't really have very much information, but we knew it wasn't a suicide. That was kind of, we knew it wasn't an overdose. And so I guess like the reason I kind of came out publicly and spoke was to kind of say, clear that up. But then also, Michael had been texting me so much about, it sucks that the right wing has like co-opted this and made it so ugly. But Michael had been speaking out so much, or at least not really speaking out, but texting me so much about his anxiety about I don't know, this kind of like cancel stuff, whatever. I've spoken about it. But part of that, I just felt this tremendous need to share about. And I also felt kind of angry because I felt like he felt so much stress from like the left BS on Twitter and the internet. And, I felt like it wasn't really conscious, but I sort of wanted to like yell at everyone about like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that
I
came
don't know
across
how.
definitely when you spoke too on the majority report the next day, that both those things you outlined of it wasn't a suicide, clear that up, and then also that like cancel culture is toxic. Like those two things really came across when you talked about it on the next day. And Michael, you saw in the last part of his work, like in the last couple months of his life, he was really like everything about his message and like what he was building was like culminating to this perfect like philosophy. And I honestly think like it was only there for like a couple months, we only got it, but I think it's enough to build. It's a foundation to build like the left we want to build off of. And I feel like when we remember Michael, or when our kids remember Michael, 100 years down the road, it'll be for that. It'll be he provided, in many ways, the framework for a left that at the time, we were very fragmented, we're very unorganized, and we don't know what to really do all the time. And he really did a good job of laying that outline. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for speaking about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I'd love to do it again. And, just I want to thank you and all the people kind of in this digital world because, obviously I've never lost, I mean, this type of loss is just so, there's just an abyss, there's just a hole, in my world. And it's, it's sort of like this weird, um, it's not really wish fulfillment because you don't want this, but it does, the amount of global compassion and public outpouring of love, it does help because, um, if Michael had never even gone online and just was my brother who suddenly passed away at 36, I would feel just as lost and grief stricken. So, in some ways, I was expressing this to, it might have been Jeremy Johnson the other day, that I almost feel like guilty that I have all this support during a time when so many people are losing loved ones, multiple loved ones. Um, and I'm just trying to let in all the support, because I do feel very humbled by how many people have continued to reach out and share love for Michael.
Absolutely. Real quick, I want you to just plug like whatever social media or like and your the Michael's Patreon too. But thank you for being there for me. I just want to put that out there as well because in a weird way, and it's kind of selfish thinking back on it, but like you were sort of an extension of Michael for me. So when that happened, it was a very hard thing for me to deal with, and I know it's hundreds of times harder for you, obviously. But you being willing to sort of you know be there for me, I appreciate that a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It feels, when you're hurting, it feels nice to, that's an ugly part in our society when people don't have money. Lots of times you're not given the opportunity to try and help other people, and I feel like grief is a similar thing. When you're
Yeah.
really hurting, usually people, you're not able to like necessarily help other people. But it's been kind of nice to be able to feel like I've in some way also been able to support other people. My Yeah, so basically the Patreon that
Mhm.
has always been up, patreon.com/tmbs. We've written out like our overview and our goals, and that's up. And then, all the socials are the same. My personal Instagram is usually where I post kind of, I don't I feel like my identity is just like grief now.
Yeah,
But one day I might post about things I'm working on. And that's, what is my Instagram? I think it's, is it my first name and last name? This
I
is
think so.
okay. This is
Yeah,
something I'm
Lisha
on
Brooks.
millions of hours a day, and I don't even know the handle. Yes, it is Lisha S, my middle initial,
Yes.
Brooks, BROOKS. Um, and then, yeah, I'm going to be starting the show for Michael, hopefully coming in early March. And that
Mhm.
is 4_MBJ on Instagram and Twitter. I need to solidify all this, but
Yeah.
one of those should get you somewhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
All right, take care.
Yep.